Gopikam Parameshwarim Gopikam Paramam Shuddha Ladinim Shakti Rupini. Divine souls, tomorrow the world will be celebrating the International Women's Day. JKYog feels honored to have the opportunity to celebrate a day-long women's conference, to do its little bit in celebrating the achievement of ordinary women in extraordinary ways, to realize the need for gender equality, and to enable the empowerment of women. To start off, what is the definition of woman? Definitions are often very limited because they are expressed in words, while entities are far more expansive. Nevertheless, here's an interesting and relevant definition of woman. Who is a woman? She is the mother of man. And hence, if the well-being of men, of the males on this planet Earth is important, the well-being of women is many times more important. People ask me, Swamiji, in your organization, why do you say Radhe Radhe? Why don't you say Radhe Sham? Well, factually, Radha and Krishna are the same divine entity. Anadirayam Purusham Ekamevasti Twadeva Rupam Dvidha Vidhaya. One supreme divine personality has taken on two forms. One is Shiv, the other is Parvati. One is Ram, the other is Sita. One is Krishna, the other is Radha. And yet, the scriptures tell us Shri Krishna Jagatan Tato Jaganmata tu Radhika. Lord Krishna is the father of creation, and Radharani Yogamaya Swarupa is the divine mother. Pito Shataguna Mata Vandya Pujyam Gariyasi. Far more venerable than the father is the position of the mother, because she is directly involved in making the deepest sacrifices. The love of the mother is so pure and so sublime. It's one of the purest things in the material realm. Hence, the mother is always venerable. Radharani is the divine mother who is worshipped in our Indian tradition in the Shakti as Durga, Kali, Mangala, Lakshmi, Sita, Parvati, etc. Those fine qualities of the Divine Mother manifest in the sacred feminine, the female species amongst human beings. Wherever we see goodness, we should realize the manifestation of the qualities of God. And that is why the wonderful heroic bravery in the males, their courage and strength is, of course, a manifestation of God's glories. But the finest of God's glories, they find their expression in the feminine species. And that is what makes women so respect worthy and so venerable. From a deeply spiritual perspective, there is really no difference between males and females. We are all souls. And the nature of the soul is it is the Shakti of the divine. From that perspective, everybody is feminine. You may have heard the story of Meerabai, the great Indian saint who has captured the imagination of generations by the sheer intensity of her bhakti towards Lord Krishna. It is said that when Rana Vikramjit, her Sautela Devar, troubled her too much in Chittorgarh, she left that kingdom and came to the land of Vrindavan. She was eager to meet some elevated sage. And the most renowned sage in Vrindavan at that time was Jiva Goswami Pad. He was the direct disciple of the disciple of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's two senior most disciples were Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami, and their nephew and disciple was Jiva Goswami. So Mirabai came to the ashram of this great sage and requested the disciples, I wish to have darshan of your Gurudev. The disciples went to Jiva Goswami and said, there is a lady, a sadhvi, who seeks your audience. Jiva Goswami in disdain said, don't you know my rules? I don't meet women. Go and tell her he does not give darshan to women. When the disciples conveyed that message to Jiva Goswami, to Mirabai, she spontaneously responded, I had heard that in Vrindavan there is only one male, that is the Param Purush, and everybody else is feminine. Who is the second male who says, I don't give darshan to women? When the disciples conveyed Mirabai's comment to Jiva Goswami, the story says he came rushing out barefoot and bowed his head. My, I am still at the bodily platform, distinguishing in this manner, but you, dear sage, are completely transcendental. From that divine perspective, everybody except the supreme divinity is feminine. That is why the Bhagavatam states, Gopinam tatpatinam cha sarvesham eva dehinam yontascharati sodhyaksha kridane neha deha bhak. Lord Krishna was the the beloved of the gopis and the beloved of the husbands of the gopis. So he is the divine husband of the gopis, their husbands, and all other Saraswati, Brihaspati, Prajapati. There is one supreme divine beloved. Everything else is his Shakti. This Shakti is classified in three. One is the Yoga Maya, which we all revere as the mother of the universe. In our Vedic tradition, we find this unique perspective to the divinity, where we see not only the masculine aspect of God, but also the nurturing, the caring, the motherly, maternal, feminine aspect of Him. And the grace we seek comes so easily through that feminine aspect. That is why, if you go to Vrindavan, you will hear them say, Radhe, Radhe, Sham se milate. Oh Radha Rani, please help me meet Sham Sundar. The sage Tulsidas, when he kept crying to Lord Ram for grace, and he was unable to receive it to the extent he wanted, he cried to Mother Sita, Kab hunka amb avasar pai, oh my divine mother, please bestow your grace, which is so much more abundant than the grace of Ram. And by that grace, I will achieve my goal. So we all realize that the mother of the universe is venerable. But to a certain extent, those wonderful spiritual qualities of the Divine Mother manifest in the sacred feminine, the feminine part of creation. And this is what we wish to realize, make everyone aware of, and celebrate on International Women's Day. So, from a divine perspective, everybody is feminine, but we are not at that platform. We are embodied souls. We have our physical dimension, emotional dimension, intellectual dimensions of our personality. So, from the physical perspective, there is a difference between the feminine and the masculine. God has selected women to bring forth creation in this world. He has selected them to play the role of motherhood. And for that reason, he has endowed women with the finest qualities to an even greater extent than the men. Those qualities need to be recognized, need to be emphasized. People, yesterday I was taking a morning walk and people were asking me, Swamiji, why is this discrimination in society? And why is it that women don't get the rights that they deserve? And I explained, look, when the currency of power in society was brute force, those who had more brute force were the ones who dominated. But we hope as the world moves ahead and the currency of respect becomes the inner qualities, women will not only achieve parity with men, but forge even further ahead. Our wonderful ancient Vedic civilization has always realized this. Just as your host for today, Rachna, was telling you that our culture is unique in the world in that it refers to women as Devi. It recognizes that they are worshipable. Manuji Maharaj, the first lawmaker on this planet Earth, in his Manusmriti, he wrote, Yatra nari yastu pujyante ramante tatra devata. Where the women are worshipped, that civilization is divine, is holy and sacred. And looking at such a society, the celestial gods take delight and rejoice. Yatraitastu na pujyante sarvas tatra phala kriya. Where women are not accorded the respect they deserve, where they are victimized, oppressed, where they are subjugated and dominated upon, there all kriyas, all the karma kand, the Vedic rituals that you may perform become totally useless, a phala. So while in the West, this concept of emancipation of women is gaining the importance that it deserves to create a correction in the wrongs that happened in history. Our ancient Vedic civilization had this perspective all along. That is why in the Rig Veda we find that the king of Swarg, the king of the celestial abodes, Indra, he received initiation into the knowledge of the universal spirit from his mother Aditi. who is known as the mother of the Devatas. People in modern times have forgotten that along with the rishis, we also had such spectacular, learned, and scholarly rishikas. One amongst them is Gargi. She was one of the jewels of the court of King Janak. And when King Janak created, presented some questions and invited scholars from all over to debate on it, 1,000 scholars arrived. After the debates, they kept getting narrowed down until there were only 8 left to do Shastrarth, scriptural argumentation with the great Yagnavalkya Muni. And amongst them, in the end, was left only Gargi. And she kept on stupefying Yagnavalkya with her philosophic questions until Yagnavalkya had to admit she is extremely learned. That Gargi remained celibate all her life. She did not marry. She is respected as a Brahmavadini, the knower of Brahma. Similarly, there was another such lady, Maitreyi, the wife of Yagnavalkya. Maitreyi was extremely learned. In the Vrihadaranyaka Upanishad, there is an elaborate philosophic dialogue that takes place between husband and wife, Yagnavalkya and Maitreyi. In fact, there is even an Upanishad dedicated to her called Maitreyi Upanishad. Chittamev hi sansaras tat prayatnena shodhayet. This mantra is from the Maitreyi Upanishad, which states, look, the dangerous world is not outside you, it is within you, in your heart. That is what you need to cleanse. And we also find in that ancient Vedic civilization, there were codes of conduct, there were moral rules that were incumbent upon all in society. In fact, we see the entire drama, the Leela of Mahabharata and Ramayana, revolves around an insult that was meted upon a woman and the grave consequences of it, which in one case resulted in the destruction of the Rakshas dynasty of Ravan, and in the other case, in the destruction of the 100 Kauravas because of the insult to Draupadi. So there were these rules of conduct in accordance to which we all know the great Bhishma would refuse to fight against Shikhandi because he knew of her feminine background. And the moment Shikhandi came in front of Bhishma, he dropped his weapons. He considered that more honorable than lifting his hand upon women. So, this was the Vedic perspective. It is interesting to note that the ancient Indian universities, amongst the first universities in the world, in Nalanda and Takshashila, they had co-education. The women were equally entitled to grow to their maximum potential. They had the freedom and the scope to manifest the divine qualities God had endowed them with. However, as the glory of ancient India kept reducing and it declined spiritually, materially, from a position where India had 1/3 of the GDP of the world, it kept declining to a major extent because of all the looting by the invaders that came from the outside. and the culture that these invaders brought with them, and the values which they injected into Indian society. That perspective of the sacred feminine, of worshipping women as the mother, kept reducing. Yet we find in the even in the later medieval period and the early modern period, there have been such great queens whom we remember even today. Who can forget Rani Ahilya Bhai Holkar? In 1767, she took on the reins of the kingdom of Malwa in what is today's Indore. After her husband had died and son had also died, she decided that she needed to protect her kingdom from invaders. And the consequence, she ruled Malwa for 30 years, which has gone down in Indian history as the golden period. Astonishingly, she built hundreds and hundreds of temples not only in her kingdom, but around the entire Bharatvarsh. She established dharmshalas, she established wayside inns, all the way from Dwarka to Jagannath Puri to Rameshwaram to Badrikashram. And one of her biggest achievements was the Kashi Vishwanath Mandir in Banaras, which had been destroyed by Aurangzeb. She rebuilt that. After that, we hear of Rani of Jhansi, the leader of India's first war of independence in 1857, when since her husband died and she did not have a child, based on the East India Company's defective rule of lapse doctrine, they said, your kingdom is now ours. And she was said, I will never give up Jhansi. So she created her own army and fought valiantly and captured the imagination of generations and generations of people in this land of Bharatvarsh. In the late 19th century, we hear of Srimati Ramabai Ranade, very astonishing woman, the wife of Justice Ranade. She saw that by now women did not possess the rights, the education that they deserved. But she wanted to do something about it. Look at the ingenuity that she had. She started a Hindu women's speaking club. This is a predecessor of the Toastmasters Worldwide Club. She said, I will empower women by enabling them to become good in public speaking. And then we hear of the Indian poet Subhadra Kumari Chauhan, who wrote the famous lines, खूब लड़ी मर्दानी वो तो झांसी की रानी थी. She was one of the first women satyagrahis who got arrested and put into jail by the British. But then after that, we also come to the great Indian poet Sarojini Naidu, who was also at the forefront of India's freedom movement and a great patriot. So, who has not heard her name in Indian literature? And she was honored as the president of the Indian National Congress. So, in the year 1917, at the meeting of the Indian National Congress, alongside with Mahatma Gandhi, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, and Rabindranath Tagore, sat Sarojini Naidu, Annie Besant, and Bibi Amman. This was the Indian perspective of inclusiveness and gender equality. Unfortunately, things have deteriorated and they need to be set right. If we wish to create a better world for all of us, we must ensure the that women get the respect, the freedom, the rights that they truly deserve. We must never forget that the consciousness of the household and the family is so much dependent on the consciousness of the homemaker, the mother. If we want more enlightened children, we must ensure that women are educated and enlightened themselves. A little bit of education makes such a huge difference. There is a very inspiring story in recent times of baby Haldar. This lady, she came from a Bengali background. Her family was working in Kashmir in the 1990s. And when she was just 4 years old, her mother ran away. Her father married another. The stepmother was extremely cruel, and the father was very harsh. That was her childhood. By the time she reached 12, while her friends used to play, she found a party at home. A lot of people had come. She was asked to come and sit in a mandap before a fire and recite some mantras. It was only later she came to know that she had been married to a man who was more than twice her age. So the cruelty of her childhood continued after marriage. And 12 years later, it became so severe that she decided to put an end to it. She took her three children, fled from home, took a train from Kashmir and reached Delhi. There she found employment in Gurgaon as a housemaid. And she worked in one house and then in another and then in another until she got employment in the house of Prabodh Kumar, who was a professor of anthropology and significantly the grandson of the legendary Munshi Prem Chand. Now, Professor Subodh Kumar would note that when baby Haldar would clean the house, when she would come to the bookshelf, she would start fondling the books with great respect. She would open them and touch the print as if it was creating some spark within her. So he had the book there of another famous Bengali writer, Taslima Nasreen, who has written about her own childhood, Amar Me Bela. He gave it to her and said, read. Now, she had forgotten much about reading because she had left school when she was in the sixth, but she tried to recollect and started reading. And then this professor gave her a notepad and said, start writing. She had actually forgotten spellings. It required effort to write. Once he had to go on a pilgrimage to South India, he left the home to her and said, write. She started writing and writing and writing. When he came back, he was astonished to see that she had written 100 pages. He showed it to his friends. They were all amazed. He encouraged her to finish the book. And that was published as Alo Andhari. It became an immediate super success where so many women in the same kind of plight could identify with her story. That book got translated in 29 Indian languages and 13 foreign languages. And that lady is today recognized as a writer. So, the potential that women carry within them, it is time they are given the scope and the freedom to manifest it for making a better world for all. Today, as we celebrate International Women's Day, in the year 2021, we can all contribute our little bit to the huge work that is required around the planet. And first, if we are gents, we must develop that sacred and divine vision to the Devi, to the mother. I am speaking to you today from the district of Kalahandi, which is one of the most backward districts of India. I have been visiting here since the last 26 years, and we have a beautiful ashram that disseminates divine knowledge throughout the district. This state of Odisha, although it's one of the most backward states of the country, it has still semblances of that ancient Vedic culture. And even the father speaks to his 5-year-old daughter and says, Ma. He looks on her as the mother. So, this is the first thing that the males can do. And if you are a female, you need to believe in yourself. You need to have that confidence and to realize that life is not only about being a caregiver, about taking care of others at home. It's about understanding your true worth and manifesting it for the pleasure of God in the service of everyone. It is said, what God gave to us is His gift. What we make of it is our gift to Him. So let us commit, if you are a woman, to be more self confident in your God given potential. And if you are mothers and fathers, to ensure that the girls in the family get the opportunities, the education, the leadership positions that they deserve. And the boys in your family learn to respect women.